I came home on a chilly Friday evening in November. Maple leaves were scattered across the yard, and I noticed my wife Sarah standing still like she was frozen near the gate, holding a small plastic grocery bag in her hand. She wasn't crying, but the slight shaking in her shoulders told me everything had already fallen apart. My name is William. I am 63 years old. I have worked as a construction contractor in Niagara for 32 years, and if there is one thing I have learned from concrete, it is this. The foundation is the one part you must never mess up. If the foundation cracks, the entire structure will collapse, no matter how nicely you decorate the walls. I have always been proud of being a reliable tradesman, the kind of man who arrives early, leaves late, and always leaves things stronger than he found them. But sometimes life places a faulty blueprint right inside your own home. Welcome back to Dad's Real Life Revenge. Get yourself a drink, maybe something to eat, sit back and relax. And remember, the people in these stories always had a chance to do the right thing, but they simply chose not to. Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. You will always get the best stories here. The house on Fernwood Crescent is not just bricks and wood. I poured every bit of concrete for those front steps with my own hands. I selected every plank of oak myself, sanding them down until they were smooth as glass so Sarah would never get a splinter. That house carries my life in it. It was supposed to be her safe place, her stronghold. But that evening when I stepped out of the truck, the cold wind from Niagara Falls felt like it went straight into my bones. Sarah looked at me with unfocused eyes. "William," she said softly, "Luke said we can't live here anymore." Her voice was shaking. My chest tightened like something had grabbed it from inside. Why didn't she call me? Why was she standing there like a stranger in her own home? It turned out our only son, Luke, a polished real estate broker who always wore expensive suits, had already planned everything. He came while I was away and used his smooth talking to twist his mother's thinking. He took her phone, saying he needed it to find lawyer contacts for help, but in reality, he isolated her completely. Then he placed stacks of documents filled with legal words in front of her and told her the house was in serious danger, and the only way to protect everything was for her to leave immediately so he could handle it. Seeing my wife standing there holding that cheap plastic bag while the warm light of our home still glowed behind the windows we had lived in for 30 years sent a cold wave through me. I didn't shout. A good contractor never panics when he sees a crack. He studies it, finds the cause, and prepares to fix it properly. In that moment, something inside me hardened like solid concrete. Luke thought he could use clever tricks and pressure to take control of our lives. But he forgot one thing. I built this house, and I know exactly where the weak points are. I looked into Sarah's eyes and gently guided her across the stone steps I had finished with my own hands decades ago. She was still trembling, the kind of shaking that comes when someone's trust has just been broken completely. I led her inside and placed the small grocery bag on the kitchen table, that same table where Luke used to sit doing homework, where he blew candles on his birthdays, where life once felt simple. I calmly poured a glass of warm water, gave it to my wife, and said in a steady voice, "Sit down, drink this, have some lemon cake. I'm not going anywhere. This is our home." Let me tell you about Sarah. She is a retired elementary school teacher, the kind of person who lights up any room she enters. She can sit for hours watching sparrows outside the window and describe their behavior like they are her former students. Sarah has always been the heart of this house. I have only ever been the structure holding it together. And now the son she once loved more than anything had tried to break that heart over numbers on a screen. Luke is a successful real estate broker in Hamilton. He has the kind of smile that could sell a burning house as if it were a luxury villa. I used to admire his confidence until I realized that confidence had no honesty behind it. He knows how to make wrong things sound reasonable. He knows how to use elderly fear and uncertainty as tools. And beside him is Mia, his wife. If Luke is the one who acts, Mia is the one who plans. She has always complained that this house is too old, too large, and too risky. Every time she visited, she pointed at tiny cracks in the wall as if they were signs of total collapse, even though I knew they were just natural settling in wood and stone. Over the summer, Luke's calls slowly changed. They were no longer about health or family. They became questions, inspections. "Dad, do you still have the deed? Mom, property taxes are rising. Let me check your documents." I thought he was just being careful. I was wrong. I had let something dangerous enter the foundation of my life without noticing. That day, while I was across town helping a friend move equipment, Luke and Mia came to the house. They brought no kindness, no warmth, only papers and manipulation. They told Sarah I was in financial trouble, that the house might be taken away, and that she needed to sign temporary papers immediately or everything would be lost. They even said police would come the next morning to seal the house. Sarah, who has never been good at deception and never believed her own child could lie, broke under the pressure. Luke also took her phone, pretending to install security settings, but really he shut it off and hid it so she could not contact me or anyone else. He told her the best solution was for me to leave temporarily while things got sorted out. Sarah repeated his words to me later, her voice breaking apart. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the cabinets I had built with my own hands. A deep disgust rose in me. The boy I taught to measure wood and hold a saw was now using those same lessons to cut into his own family. He thought he understood property better than a man who had spent 30 years working with building codes, contracts, and real construction law. If you are still following this story, take a moment and tell me where you are watching from. It means a lot to know how far this has reached. I placed my hand on Sarah's shoulder. I could feel her heartbeat slowly settling under my palm. When a structure is damaged, you don't panic. You support it first so it doesn't collapse further. Let me handle this, I said quietly. We are staying here. Tonight we sleep in our own bed. Tomorrow Luke learns something important. You never build your future by destroying your parents. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I never thought I would need again. Margaret Voss. She is not just a lawyer, she is someone who understands real estate battles like warfare. If Luke wanted to use law as a weapon, I was ready to bring something stronger. Outside, night settled over Niagara. Streetlights lit the falling maple leaves in deep red tones. I did not feel fear. I felt calm determination. Luke had made a mistake. He assumed age meant weakness. He forgot that concrete only becomes stronger with time. I checked the front door lock. The sharp click echoed through the house like the start of a new phase. That night, I could not sleep. I sat in an old chair, watching moonlight move across the room. Sarah slept lightly, still tense even in rest. Her hands, once strong from decades of teaching, now looked fragile. I remembered Luke as a child in 1998, sitting in the backyard watching me build a small wooden playhouse. I had taught him how to measure straight, how to keep a blade aligned. Never lie to your ruler, I told him back then. If your line is crooked, everything built on it will fail. He had once nodded with admiration. So when did his line become crooked? The pain was not about losing a house. A house can be rebuilt. The real pain was realizing betrayal had grown inside my own family like termites eating through a beam. Luke was not just my son. He was the project I invested my life in. Education, discipline, lessons about honesty. I gave him everything I knew. Yet somehow the foundation of his character had cracked. Mia, his wife, looked at our home like it was an investment sheet, not a place filled with memories. No warmth, only calculation. I felt anger building slowly inside me, steady and heavy. Sarah never wanted luxury. She only wanted peace, her garden, her roses, and quiet mornings. Luke destroyed that with paperwork and lies. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the small grocery bag again. Inside were a scarf I once gave Sarah, a family photo, and some flower seeds. That was all she managed to take before being pushed out. My throat tightened. This was not just betrayal. It was disrespect for everything we built. Luke, you think you understand value because you work in real estate. But you do not understand what a home really is. You think I am too old to fight back. But you are wrong. An old contractor defending his family is far more dangerous than you think. That night, I wrote a promise to myself. Tomorrow, everything would change. I would no longer be just a father hoping for understanding. I would treat this situation like a damaged structure that needed repair, by removing everything rotten, no matter what name it carried. I looked at the concrete steps outside. They stood solid and unchanged, just like truth. And I realized something final. I should have built my son with the same strength. I just reinforced it, I said quietly. That afternoon, we went back to Fernwood Crescent. The air felt cooler than before, with that early autumn bite that makes everything feel sharper and more real. Terrence was already there when we arrived, leaning casually near the gate with that familiar wide grin on his face, like he had been waiting for a victory moment he already knew would come. He had finished his work. Every lock in the house had been replaced, not the old weak ones anymore, but strong, heavy-duty locks, the kind that feel like they belong to a place that is finally safe again. Only 2 keys existed now, mine and Sarah's. That was it. No surprises left, no hidden access, just control returned to where it belonged. We all sat on the front porch for a while. No one rushed the moment. The wind moved through the trees slowly, and red maple leaves kept breaking free and drifting down into the yard like soft reminders that time keeps moving no matter what happens in life. I looked down the road that led to our house. That same road suddenly felt different. I still remembered how Luke used to drive down it in his polished car, acting confident, like he could take over everything we built. Back then, he believed strength meant control over others. Now that road was empty, quiet, almost peaceful in a way that felt strange at first, but then right. It felt like everything had finally returned to its proper place. The disruption was gone. The betrayal had been removed. What remained was stability, even if it had been rebuilt through pain and hard decisions. Justice had been carried out in the only way it could be, not clean, not gentle, but necessary. Sarah sat next to me, holding a warm cup of tea in both hands. Her shoulders were relaxed now, no longer carrying that invisible weight she had been forced to live with before. Looking at her, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. She looked like a woman who had never been forced out of her own home with a grocery bag in her hands, like she had always belonged exactly where she was. That image alone alone felt like a victory I could never fully describe. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. The real revenge wasn't anger or destruction. It was restoring dignity. It was showing that no matter how carefully someone plans to break your life apart, they cannot reach the foundation of what is truly yours. Luke could manipulate situations, lie, and scheme, but he could never touch the core of this home again. He could never break what we had rebuilt inside ourselves. I glanced at the pile of dry maple leaves gathering in the yard and gave a small, tired smile. "Tomorrow," I said to Sarah, "I'll clean up those leaves. We should get everything neat before winter comes, don't you think?" She nodded softly, sipping her tea. At that moment, everything felt settled. Not perfect, not untouched by history, but steady, like a structure that had survived a storm and was finally standing straight again. The foundation was strong once more, and we, the real owners of this life and home, were still here. If you have listened this far, then you have walked with me through the hardest parts of this story. I appreciate that more than words can easily express. Stay a little longer, and I want to share what this journey taught me, because it changed the way I see everything now. The next morning arrived gently, without noise or tension. The first light of autumn slipped through the curtains and spread softly across the bed. Sarah had already changed the sheets the day before, and the room carried a calm scent of clean fabric and morning sunlight. It was the kind of atmosphere that tells you something heavy is finally gone. There were no sudden phone calls, no arguments waiting at the edge of the day, no feeling of dread sitting quietly in the background of every breath. I walked downstairs and found Sarah already in the kitchen. She was focused on the oven, moving calmly as the warm smell of coffee cake filled the entire house. The aroma spread into every corner, replacing the old memory of tension that used to live there when Luke's lies were still hanging over us. For a moment, I just stood there and watched. It felt like the house itself had learned how to breathe again. I stepped outside onto the porch and took a deep breath of the crisp Niagara air. The wind felt clean, almost like it was washing away the last traces of everything we had gone through. Terrence had already been by early that morning. He left a small basket of fresh apples on the porch step along with a handwritten note. I picked it up and read it slowly. "The foundation's set. Time to enjoy the house, old friend." I couldn't help but smile. I picked up a broom and began sweeping the fallen maple leaves across the yard. Each movement felt strangely light, almost like I was removing not just leaves, but the weight of everything that had built up over time. In construction, there is a moment we call final inspection. It's when everything has already been repaired, corrected, or replaced, and you finally step back to see the full structure standing safely in front of you. That was exactly what this felt like. Luke had already received his judgment, not just from people around him, but from the consequences of his own actions. The real estate board permanently revoked his license after Margaret presented clear and undeniable evidence of forged property documents. There was no room left for excuses or manipulation. I also heard that Mia left quickly once their joint accounts were frozen during the investigation. Everything they built on dishonesty had started collapsing piece by piece, just like it always does when truth finally steps in. People often forget a simple rule of life. What is built on harm to others never stays strong for long. But what mattered most to me wasn't their downfall. It wasn't watching them lose what they had taken for granted. That was never the real victory. The real peace came from something much quieter. It was seeing Sarah now, sitting peacefully on the porch in her rocking chair, holding a warm cup of tea, calmly looking at the garden, as if she had never been forced to leave it. There was no fear in her eyes anymore, no tension in her body, just calm presence. That peace was something I would protect for the rest of my life. That was the only thing I truly wanted back, and now it was here. As the sun moved higher, I kept sweeping the yard slowly. Each stroke of the broom felt like a reminder that life can be rebuilt, even after it has been shaken. Evening eventually settled over Niagara. The sky turned deep shades of orange and red, and the house on Fernwood Crescent stood quietly under it all, steady and unchanged in its spirit. I set the broom aside and walked over to sit beside Sarah on the porch. We didn't talk about Luke. We didn't talk about court cases or broken trust or any of the noise that once filled our lives. Instead, we talked about simple things: flowers for the garden, paint colors for the fence, small plans for a future that finally felt open again. Order had been restored, not just around us, but within us. The house stood strong again, not because of locks or concrete, but because the people inside it had learned how to protect what mattered. And if there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this: never allow anyone to convince you that you don't belong in your own life. Never give away your foundation, even when others try to shake it. You are the one who decides what stays and what falls. I'm William, and this was Dad's real-life revenge.